Yeah,
Yep,
and we are
we are
live.
live.
We are live. Welcome back to LOOPcast. I'm joined today by Josh Mercer, and in place of the intrepid Pogo, who is off on vacation still, we have our president, Brian Burch, president of CV. So I am joined by my president and vice president, which is kind of fun. So welcome, Brian.
Well,
thanks for being here.
this is a little nerve-wracking because I don't think I can come close to filling in for Tom, but I'm going to do my best. Certainly not as good looking, certainly not as young, and not as up on pop culture and politics and how those two all connect. But no, hopefully Tom's having a good time away, and maybe he's tuning in just to see how covering
Just
for
a
him.
spy. Yeah, I could not resist tuning in once in a while during maternity leave because I was like, just how are the guys doing? They were great. Yeah, we won't try and replicate Tom's Gen Z lingo because it's just going to get awkward with all the old parents on today. So here we go. But we have a great
Let's
show.
celebrate it,
Yeah,
Gen X
let's
for the
celebrate.
win. Let's go.
Yeah, exactly. This is the old people's podcast.
We took over. It's awesome. All right. Okay, so we have a great show lined up today. I'm going to give you an update on parole in place, and then we'll talk about weaponization continues against whistleblowers at Texas Children's. We're going to do a little church corner, some updates on the USCCB, and the expertise today is on polling and all things elections, so we'll lean into that as well. But first, do you know a 16 to 21-year-old who is attending college or planning to attend college? The deadline for the CatholicVote scholarship is coming up at the end of this month. I'm going to drop the link. Your child, your student, your friend, your godchild could win up to $10,000 in scholarships. And part of the entry is you take some Hillsdale courses, free online Hillsdale courses on constitutional law and the history of the United States. They are so good. I did take 2 Hillsdale courses during maternity leave, which were super interesting, high quality. So it would be great for your student, not only financially, but also just overall formation as an American citizen. So check that out in the show notes.
The Hillsdale courses I took cost a lot more money than that.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and you can pay attention this time, Josh.
Yeah, right.
That's right.
Well, just a quick plug for that too. My son saw the thing in the Loop, and he's a senior in high school, and he's like, "Oh, Dad, I should really try this thing out." And I said, "Yeah, all you have to do is listen into these Hillsdale courses. You can kind of just, when you're doing something else, have it on in the background so you can make sure you satisfy the requirement." And he said, "No, actually, I'm doing it. I'm really interested. These classes are really interested. I don't even care if I get the scholarship." So
that's great.
I thought it was pretty interesting that even a high school senior was finding these politics courses at Hillsdale, fascinating. So yeah, definitely big plug for Hillsdale. They're free, even if you don't get the scholarship. Time well spent.
Yeah, very much so. Shout out to Chris in the chat there. He says he's taken Mark Twain. Very cool.
Yeah, and actually that's funny because Hillsdale has a lot of these other courses that you can just take. Like they have even on math, and they have one on World War II, and they have one on citizenship, and we just got to find ways for our kids to be doing something over the summer, like make sure they got like a job, or they're doing something like reading books or taking these classes. And I have one of my high school students that's going to be taking dual enrollment college classes from Franciscan this summer. It's like, just,
that's great.
Don't waste this summer. Do something with it.
That's right. Use your leisure time well. And of course, I would be remiss if I did not wish you all a happy Juneteenth. Today, of course, is June 19th and federal holiday now. Can we pull up that, Rez? Can we pull up our Babylon Bee status here? This is actually not the Bee. They put it on the wrong account. I don't know if he's going to hear me in time, but they had a great line. They said, well, let's see. Nope, not coming. Okay. America celebrates Juneteenth, the day Republicans freed all the Democrats' slaves. Which is actually fairly historic.
As they say, he's not lying.
He's not lying.
Yeah.
Not lying.
Well, I mean, the thing is, we had on the last LOOPcast, we had Jeremy Tate. He's a great education reformer. And he took to Twitter this morning and reminded everyone, Juneteenth isn't woke. The commemoration was started by pure grit Texas Christians in the 1870s. Everyone should celebrate Juneteenth as a commemoration of the end of slavery. So I agree with that. Although I do think in the way it was kind of thrusted on us, it did kind of incite some backlash because it felt like it was a woke DEI thing, but let's make it what it really ought to be, a celebration of the liberation of 4 million people. So, and it
Yeah.
was started, like you said, by Texas Christians. So that's good.
Yeah, I agree
Yeah, I
with
don't
that.
want to.
Go
I
ahead.
don't want to tease my Twilight Zone, which maybe I'll come
Oh,
with another one because it does relate to Juneteenth. So later in the episode, but I agree
okay.
with Josh and Jeremy. I mean, that fundamentally the holiday is a good thing. It's celebrating the overcoming of our original sin as a nation. I think some of the challenge has been we pretend or it's foisted on us as if it is the new 4th of July, that the 4th of July was this flawed holiday that didn't include all Americans. Although, it's interesting because, but for the 4th of July, the Declaration of Independence, you wouldn't have Juneteenth. We wouldn't have had a civil war over the fundamental principle of the dignity of all people. And so, this idea that somehow this is this new founding of the country with 1619, it's a kind of, we need to reimagine an America that now incorporates the idea of equality is just, it's preposterous. Of course, we didn't do it perfectly from the start, but we set in motion the very thing that makes Juneteenth possible. And, the whole kind of focus on that race as the single most defining question that ought to determine all things America is just preposterous. We need to,
And past, present,
holidays
and
need to be
forever,
something
apparently.
that we celebrate together, that it's
Mhm.
universal, that every American can buy into it. So I actually think we're in kind of a stage where we're still so fixated on this identity politics thing, but over time, I think Juneteenth will come to be celebrated in the way that ideally it should be, which is we did it. We as a country overcame this horrendous institution of slavery, and what a celebration it was for those slaves in Texas when they finally got word that yes, and a Republican president, Abraham Lincoln, that the Emancipation Proclamation freed them.
That's right.
And one hell of a general, too, and Ulysses S. Grant. Guy was a
Yes.
buck.
He was a bug. All right. Speaking of Texas, we're going to get into our first story here. This is really big coming out of Texas Children's Hospital. And the story has kind of 2 points, or 2 parts. I'm going to set it up for you and then hear what you all have to comment on it. So Dr. Ethan Heim, this came out just about a year ago in 2023. He was a surgical resident at the Houston-based Texas Children's Hospital. And he gave, we've talked many times about Chris Rufo on this program, conservative journalist, definitely someone who gets the job done. Dr. Heim sent records to Rufo that indicated the hospital was secretly continuing, quote, transgender medical interventions, including hormone therapy on minors and even surgical interventions on minors, in spite of the fact that the hospital had said publicly, we no longer do this, we stopped these treatments, etc. So here's the timeline. February 2022, so just over 2 years ago, the Texas Attorney General releases an opinion that so-called gender-affirming care for kids constitutes child abuse under Texas law. It could do that if it was brought to court. That March, Texas Children's Hospital pledges to stop all of these interventions and shuts down essentially the hospital's transgender program for kids. 3 days later, Dr. Heim says, and he has documentation to prove it, he witnessed a surgeon implanting hormone release devices into a healthy 11-year-old girl. And he said hundreds more such surgeries were performed over the course of the next year. He sent all of this documentation to Rufo, and partly due to the story that came out with bipartisan support, the Texas legislature almost immediately passes a law banning transgender medical interventions on minors. So again, within 24 hours of the story being released, the conduct that was exposed was set into motion to make it illegal. So this is one of those instances of Rufo getting stuff done. Fast forward to this past week, U.S. Marshals appear at Dr. Heim's home and summon him to court, facing an indictment on 4 felony counts violating HIPAA. He faces 10 years in prison and over $250,000 in fines. And this picture is actually from the second half of the story. But yes, the FBI had shown up at his door a few months ago, kind of giving him like the push, giving him a few bullying remarks. But then he was finally indicted this week and faces these charges. All right. So my question for you, does this sound familiar as far as tactics go? And are these charges legit? What do you think?
Well, I'll jump in on this. I mean, this strikes me as the classic, whether the communist line, I forget who originally said it, show me the man, I'll show you the crime.
Right.
Would he have been prosecuted? Would the federal government have come after him for some HIPAA violation question had he not engaged in exposing clear violation of Texas law, exploitation of children, the continued, what is this again? I can't believe we even talking about these kinds of things. Implantation of a hormonal, what was it?
A hormonal release device, a slow release.
Hormonal release
to keep her on
device.
testosterone. Yeah.
Yeah. We actually using terms like this today, which is just so outrageous. But
Right.
yeah, this is the classic new weaponization of the government norm. If you go against the new woke ideology, particularly when it comes to gender, you better make sure you have all your papers in order. Better have filed your taxes perfectly, paid all your parking tickets,
Right.
mowed your lawn, used the right light bulbs, because if not, they're going to find something you did wrong, and you might, not just receive a notice in the mail, but might get a knock on the door.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, though, this is why, like, when it comes to doing my own personal taxes too, I'm like, I'm not cheating. No way, no how. Like, oh, $100 here. Who's going to notice? Like, are you kidding me? I work for a political action committee. These guys, I'm not giving them any rope to come after me. No
You're
way.
even more risky than me. You do your own taxes. I don't even trust myself. I have to hire someone so I can say, please make sure they're done right. And at least I'll have, someone to blame if they're not. Well, certainly you've seen those studies where people, 10 tax preparers look at a tax return and 9 of them come up with a different number.
Yeah.
It's the classic, there's no way to behave perfectly. But no, but back to the issue. This is, I mean, people pretend as if somehow these are some sort of scandalous social media controversies, conspiracy theories. No, this is the new norm. The federal government is being used to hunt down people who disagree with the new ideology. There's no other way of framing this. That the selective prosecution of political opponents, whether it's a former president, whether it's a pro-life activist, father of 7, or in this case, a medical doctor who exposes the clear violation of Texas law. We have to come to grips with this is the kind of government we're facing, and precisely why November elections matter. These are the kinds of things that will stop happening if we change the person in the Oval Office.
Just 30, 40 years ago, if we had found out that there were surgeons and doctors, at a hospital providing, hormone blockers to kids, yes, federal agents would have been involved because they would have arrested the doctors. Like, and now they're arresting the person who's blowing the whistle on this. It really is the world upside down world.
Yeah, it's insane.
Well, and Josh knows this, and not to give too many details because we have some things coming. Our research team has been working with a number of organizations, corporations to look into this whole kind of gender craze, particularly when it comes to children. And again, not to reveal too many details, but what we've discovered is there are tens of thousands of surgeries occurring on children as young as 7 years old in this country today. And yes, we blame this woke ideology and this idea that this kind of new crazy, that gender is a social construct and all the sort of, philosophical
Which is
debates.
an element of it.
Mm-hmm.
It is an element of it, but it all comes down to something very simple. Follow the money. These surgeries, these medicines, they are making these doctors millions and millions of dollars. And one of the experts we talked to,
and it's a lifetime of treatment.
Well, this is exactly it. He said, essentially what this whole gender industry is about is consigning patients, giving them a chronic disease, where it's not just a surgery or a hormonal treatment they receive and then they're done. In order to essentially fight nature, you have to treat this patient their entire life. with all sorts of ongoing medicines and medicines that counteract the defects of the last medicine. And so this patient essentially becomes a money-making, funnel
Customer
for
for
these
life.
customers for
Mhm.
life. Who genius if you've created a product. It's the like the Gillette Bic razor theory that you create something where they need to come back to you regularly,
Planned
recurring
obsolescence.
revenue.
Yeah.
Although in this
Mhm.
case, you're essentially using someone's body
Body.
as your profit. It's just the
And it's
whole
irreversible,
industry
and
is so corrupt, and it's so exploitative of these young kids, and it's just the more and more I think people
it
find out
doesn't
about this.
it doesn't address the underlying cause, the underlying
Right.
problem that if somebody feels like they are in the wrong body, then they need help, and it's usually help that's less physical but more emotional. They need like therapy. They need someone to kind of walk through
Yeah.
the problems that they have. And again, this is where it's crazy because the FBI is going after the whistleblowers. And that video that we showed for a brief second there, that was actually, as Erika noted, that's the one that came after the second whistleblower, the nurse. And we have this on video. These don't look like what you would think of as normal FBI agents. They're kind of dressed casual,
They're
like summer
big
cash.
Texan guys. Yeah. They
Yeah,
have drawls.
FBI, boy summer or whatever they call it. But this is only on video because she has like, what is it,
It's her ring. It's
simply
her
safe or
Amazon ring.
ring or
Yeah.
whatever. Yeah.
Mhm.
And they're talking, and then the video cuts out, and people are like, why did the video cut out? Because the nurse
Let
invited
them
them
in.
into her house. And can I just tell any loopcasters out there, dude, that you do not let the federales in the house. She said, here's my lawyer. You give them the information, or give me your business card, and I'll have my lawyer contact you. You don't let them
Mhm.
in, and it's so beautiful that this guy has this thing recorded, so that we can know what's going on. But these guys, they'll get you over, as Brian said, they'll find a process crime, a paperwork crime to get you. And again, this is what is just laughable about all of this. We have a mainstream media that loves to champion the whistleblower, right?
Mhm.
Only if it exposes Republicans or conservatives, right? But if it
Mhm.
goes after anything else, suddenly they're not that important. Like, why is this doctor and this nurse that are that are blowing the whistle on the hospital in Texas that's breaking crime, that's committing crimes? Why isn't the media celebrating them? Why
Mhm.
didn't they celebrate Kyle Seraphin for blowing the whistle on the FBI? Oh,
Mm.
because they didn't like the
Well,
Yeah.
message.
of
Yeah.
course, it's. Oh, go ahead, Erica.
I was just gonna say talk about follow the money here too. The second whistleblower who came out this came out yesterday, that she's being targeted as well. The second whistleblower, she actually revealed through her documentation that the hospital, Texas Children's, was using Medicaid funding for some of these surgeries. What she was noticing as a nurse in the gender clinic was that patients were coming who had no private insurance. Patients were coming who had no, they didn't have their own funds. But the doctors in question, Richard Ogden Roberts and David Paul, they were cutting corners and they were submitting Medicaid uh, reimbursements basically. So not only not only is the industry taking money and making millions off of the private sector and off of private individuals who can afford these, but it seems too that the taxpayer dollars are going to
Yeah,
fund these kinds of procedures through fraud.
and Medicaid is a state-federal partnership, and states have the ability to put restrictions and regulations on it. And Texas has a
Which Texas
prohibition
has.
on
Mhm.
that so-called gender-affirming care, which is like, no, we don't want our Medicaid dollars to be used to mutilate children.
Mhm.
And so again, it seems like they're violating another law.
Yeah, absolutely. And I
Well,
think
I was just going
too,
to make the point too that
yeah,
of course, you see FBI agents visiting a doctor who's, again, as Josh pointed out, a whistleblower who deserves to be applauded, not punished. But meanwhile, once again, the double standard here: hundreds and hundreds of attacks on Catholic churches, and the FBI is nowhere to be found. I mean, we're seeing now 2 to 3 attacks on churches per week. Where's the FBI? We don't know. It's interesting because
Hunting
we
down
just got a
nurses.
Yeah, we just got a letter yesterday, by the way, from the Department of Justice. It's always
I was
fun to
going to
open
ask
up
for an
your
update here. Yeah.
yeah,
What'd they
you open up
say?
your email in the morning and you see, at doj.gov. It's, oh no, gosh, here it is. Here's my turn. I didn't file my taxes right.
They're
From
coming
a
for
different
me.
agency. No, this was a letter again, playing a little bit of Band-Aid, saying, "Dear Mr. Burch, we are so pleased to inform you that we have finally prosecuted 2 people for one crime that happened 2 years ago, for a defacing and intimidation of a pregnancy resource center in Florida. This was a center that offers alternatives to abortion. It's supported by the Archdiocese of Miami. They finally are so proud to tell us they have reached a plea deal with 2 or maybe 3 activists from Jane's Revenge. The sentencing is coming up. Now, I'm going to be very curious to watch this, by the way, what they are actually sentenced to. According to the press release, they could face up to 10 years in prison. Let's, mark this Loopcast. I'm going to predict, I'm going to give it 90 days or less if they do any time whatsoever.
Yeah.
But of course, we're going to respond and say, well, thank you for finally finding some crime that was worthy of the FBI's attention or the Department of Justice's attention. But, what about the 400 and some other attacks that have occurred? And can you give us an update on where we're at there? Particularly as attacks on churches are only increasing, by the way. This is not some thing of the past. This is an ongoing problem that maybe they're just short on resources because they're out finding HIPAA violations.
Or prosecuting
at this
pro-life
rate,
protesters.
they
for
should
FASE
get
Act.
all of them done in another 399 years?
Yeah.
You're right. At this pace, you're right. Exactly.
Unbelievable. All right. So moving on from weaponization. Actually, we had a question come in to the mailbag. We solicited some questions knowing that Brian would be on. This is from Maria in Arizona. She asked, what do you hope to see for accountability with the misapplication of justice in the Biden administration? I'm thinking not just about surprising cases against President Trump, well, not really surprising, Maria, but also in the selective charges against pro-lifers. Should individuals like Merrick Garland, Fani Willis, and Kristen Clark be removed from their positions and potentially face prosecution themselves? So that's from Maria. Brian, what do you want to say?
Well, this is actually something I was thinking about recently. If Donald Trump wins the White House, it's going to be very interesting to think about the opportunity he's going to have and the kinds of things he's going to need to prioritize, because the amount of violations and abuse of government and need for new policy, there's, get in line. There's going to be hundreds of things that are going to need to be done. In terms of the weaponization of government, there absolutely needs to be accountability. Not just, well, let's have some hearings and discover what needs to happen. People need to be prosecuted. If, in fact, the Department of Justice was misused for political purposes and people were targeted based upon their political beliefs, and we need to get to the bottom of that, then absolutely people need to be held accountable. I think this is one of the things we're all learning, having watched how they're behaving with respect to Trump and others, is we can no longer just kind of write policy papers and hold some hearings and say, naughty, naughty, don't do that again, until there are actual punishments rendered and people are held accountable, where there is, whether it's people go to jail or people are disbarred or all the various remedies that are available for when people violate the law or the ethics of their profession. We need to demand this, because real accountability is the only real way we're going to stop this. It's the only way that we're going to dissuade future actors, whether in any administration, but future actors from behaving in the way that they are today.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I feel like they need to receive a taste of their own medicine. I mean, like, the next time Bill Clinton goes to a red state, whether it's Florida or Texas, they should just indict him for some crime. Just make up a crime like they did for Trump and say, hey, how's this taste? And have one of your
Well, you don't
heroes
need to make up
prosecuted.
one. There's plenty of
I don't think we have to make it up.
Right. He probably filed his taxes wrong.
There's always something. All right. Speaking of firing Joe Biden, we have some amazing, I mean, just crazy polls coming out. And we had a particular one that was on CNN. So I don't know if we can pull that up, Rez. This is the CNN analyst just could not believe the black vote. So he's pointing to all these numbers. He's
It's
talking about
incredible.
it is this is historic, right? Biden is down 43 points with black voters under 50. I don't know. Do you want to play a little bit of this, Rez? Because it's really fun to listen to this guy.
He's lost 43 points. Yeah, he's not
lost.
down.
He's lost 43 points.
I don't know if we're getting the audio here.
Yeah.
I mean, to recap what's going on here, Harry Ensign is a data analyst. He's pretty sharp and he's pretty honest. And he's just talking about how, like, Biden's support amongst blacks over 50 remains very, very strong. Only not that much.
Are we losing Josh here?
Oh, we lost Josh. All right. Brian, maybe you can break this down for us.
Yeah.
I know you wrote about this in the Insider.
I think Josh might be back. Otherwise,
you back, Josh?
Oh, you're there. You're back, Josh.
Sorry about
that.
We
missed you the last 20 seconds. You broke up a little bit.
It was the FBI. They tapped.
Yeah, they're coming after me. I mean, I was just saying that the change here is that amongst blacks over the age of 50, there hasn't been that much of a change in support. It's just a slight dip. But blacks under the age of 50, there's been an erosion of support. I mean, Biden's still leading in this demographic, but not anywhere near where he needs to be. And this is why the race is tightening. I mean, it's like, that's why I think Georgia's out of reach. And North Carolina, I didn't think really was ever in play. And other states, like, are going to be harder for Biden to win. It's making Michigan harder. It's making, Pennsylvania harder. So.
Yeah, well, so Josh is right. I mean, I love this clip, and Josh will laugh because the guy says, "Holy cow!" And I'm, as a Cubs fan, I'm usually like immediately I'm paying attention, but it wasn't Harry Carey hit this time; it was a CNN analyst, and he's talking about. That's true, but he's talking about this huge erosion in support, where 37% of black voters under the age of 50 are now supporting President Trump. And you can say, okay, Georgia, North Carolina, of course, larger black population is going to make a difference. To me, the most interesting thing here is, what does this mean about just the entire shifting of the electorate? If young black voters are moving, what's happening with Hispanics? What's happening with working class people? Because generally that kind of voter isn't just an isolated black voter with really unique issues just to them. This is happening beneath the surface. And as the analyst says, we haven't seen this kind of support among black voters for a Republican in 6 decades.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, it's that significant since, 6 decades. Yeah. Basically, or 5 decades.
Yeah. Nixon.
Since
60s,
Nixon. Right.
Yeah.
And so if that happens, I mean, and we've talked about this a little bit in the Insider as well. I mean, let's not get too ahead of ourselves, but if voters, particularly infrequent voters like black voters, these kinds of voters that are moving, turn out in record numbers, we could see a landslide in November. And actually, it relates to something we wrote in the Insider as well, this whole shift that's occurring among, Republicans used to be the more reliable voters, the suburban voters, the more affluent voters, and Democrats would struggle to get their minority base out. Those were less frequent voters. So Republicans did really good in midterms and special elections, and then Democrats would do real well in presidential years. That's all flipping. I think you can now even start to look at what happened in the 2022 midterms and say, well, this is because the makeup of the parties is changing. And so Republicans didn't do as well as they thought they would do in 2022. They're not doing as well in some of these special elections. And the real test is going to come in November. If this shift is real, and voters reappear in presidential years, and that the Republican Party is now made up of a large portion of these less frequent voters that reappear in presidential years, yes, I think President Trump could win handily.
He's got a multiracial working class coalition, and you're right, also for Hispanics, because that's why Nevada is not just, Nevada hasn't voted Republican since 2004, and now it's considered very likely to flip. In Arizona, he's doing very well with, and that's because of the working class. Now, here's the thing: the media doesn't really like to talk about, like, why would this be happening? Why would you see so many working class blacks and Hispanics
That's
voting
my next
for
question.
Trump?
Yep.
Okay. Now,
Why?
just like what's going on in Michigan, it's like there's the Dearborn factor where the Muslims are not happy with Biden with the Gaza, but what's really going on is there's economic pressure on working class voters in Michigan because of the electronic vehicle mandate, and the auto industry doesn't like that. The workers at those plants don't like that. It's costing them jobs. So, but that's not okay. So, what about the black voters and Hispanic voters? Like the blacks in Georgia and Hispanics in Arizona who have voted for Democrats many times. Now they're going to vote for Trump. Immigration is putting major economic downward pressure on working class voters, and they're abandoning Biden in massive numbers, and they're doing what was once thought unthinkable. They are voting for the Republican candidate because of immigration. They realize that the crime and also competition for jobs, they realize, unlike so many people with their fancy press releases, a massive illegal immigration is not good for the average Joe.
Yeah.
Well, I think there's another thing going on here too, Josh, and you're right on this. They're looking at, hey, look how expensive it costs to get groceries and get gas and housing, and you look at the inflation numbers. I mean, some of these things are up 20-25% since Biden took office. Certainly wages haven't kept pace, but it used to be back in previous election cycles, it'd say, well, look, I get it, Mitt Romney might be better on the economy, which, by the way, all the exit polling showed that he did, or this Republican might be better to handle foreign policy, or this Republican candidate might be better on this. But you can't vote for the party of racism. You can't vote for the party that wants to put you back in chains, as we know.
It's the identity
and yet,
politics.
the interesting thing is they're now calling their bluff and saying, wait a minute, I'm not buying that anymore. And yes, they may share some of the Democratic focus on civil rights and overcoming inequality when it comes to vestiges of racism, but it's not enough anymore. And I think that's one of the more significant things here is they're saying we're willing to take a chance on the other party, whereas we're not just going to be quickly bought off once again on, well, yes, all these things might be fine, but we're not voting for the racists.
Yeah, and how much?
Well, and again, 12 years ago, that the ad that you and I love to talk about, Brian, that the super PAC that supported Barack Obama said, Mitt Romney, they interviewed this blue collar worker from Marion, Indiana, and he talked about how they got us all three guys in the factory, all three shifts to work in building this stage, and we get there and it turns out the guy comes out and announces, "You're all fired," and he goes, "I didn't realize I was building that stage. I was building my own grave." It's like, it was such an effective ad. And it was like, and he said Mitt Romney was the one that made millions of dollars closing our factory and losing our jobs. And ultimately, I remember watching that ad when it first came out. My mouth was a gasp. I was like, this is one of the best ads I've ever seen in my life. It was so effective. And again, Barack Obama, so many conservatives, like, how could this guy get reelected? The economy wasn't good in 2012. He is not that, bright. Everyone thinks, oh, he's great. On all these policies, people didn't like the healthcare, all that stuff that was done. He was able to win again because he said, I care about you. And this other guy is the guy that would fire you. And working class voters said, you know what? You got a point there. And
you could make that ad.
Ultimately lost.
Yeah, the Trump campaign could make that ad again, though, and just insert Joe Biden with an auto industry guy up in.
Well, here's the thing. I mean, that's like Democrats. This is the kind of ad that Democrats used to do, and they did it effectively. And it's like, now they're going to be like, well, let's not do that, which is a super effective ad. Let's attack Republicans by saying they're against democracy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Did you see their new the anti-Trump ad that just came out? I think it was yesterday or the day before. But it is a classic like 1990s ad. It leans into the convicted felon thing. So you have bad orange man Trump, convicted felon with really bad music. And then you have like Joe comes on the screen, light, happy music, the man who cares about you and your family. And then it's, I'm Joe Biden and I approve this message. It's boring. It's a boring ad, but yeah, they're definitely leaning into the convicted felon as we kind of expected.
But they're not talking about the actual issues that matter to so many people. And again,
Exactly.
like,
Yeah.
the people who run the Biden campaign and I actually have something in common. I wish the American people loved every idea that I liked and was concerned about every issue I cared about. But you have to be a little bit more humble and realize that, you know what, actually, wait a minute now. If I want to represent people, I need to understand what it is that they have concerns about and not to consider those delegitimate. There's often reasons why people care about the things that they care about. And jobs is not nothing. It is their livelihood, it is the means upon which they provide for their family. So that's why that ad against Romney was so effective 12 years ago. And that's why, today Donald Trump is saying, look, they're handing out gift cards to illegals in New York City. How are you doing? Do you think that's fair? Are things going great for your family? And people are like, pfft, and they get upset, rightly so, because they're like, this just doesn't seem right.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm just echoing this. Every election is won by the candidate that voters perceive to be who cares about me. That's at the end of the day, and you can insert all the issues, whether social issues on the right or economic issues or certain issues on the left. At the end of the day, those voters who swing back and forth between Republican and Democrat candidates, election to election, they make that choice based upon what person cares about me. And I'm sorry, threats to democracy and talk about threats to democracy don't exactly inspire. This person cares about me.
Or telling us that we shouldn't believe our own eyes, and Joe Biden wandering off stage with Obama guiding him is like, there's nothing there, nothing to see. Don't believe your lying eyes, KGP. Yeah.
Yeah, and like the threat to democracy argument is actually echoes the Republican argument back in 1998. Like Bill Clinton, he lied under oath, and American voters are like, okay, but like, why am I going to suddenly give you all of Congress because of that? I mean, explain to me. And again, it's like one of these things where you can wish, we got them. Like you still need to talk about the issues that matter to people.
Yeah, speaking of Congress, I did want to ask, so we're talking about a potential landslide. Like if the election was today, Trump wins, potential landslide in November, although who knows what the Democrats are going to pull out, Black Swan event. But does that mean we're also going to see, is Trump going to pull Congress along with him? Are we going to see Congress flip in November? What do you think, Brian?
Well, I think the chances of the Republicans taking the Senate are about 90% right now because it's so evenly divided and there's not many pickup opportunities for Democrats. West Virginia is almost guaranteed to flip Republican. I mean, it's like, and then Montana, Ohio are very close to being flipped. So, I mean, and then the House, that's a tough one. But if at the way things are going, if Trump is, like at this time of the polls in 2020, the polls showed Biden leading by about 8 points, and Trump is now up by about 2. And if anything, I agree with liberal Matt Iglesias, I forget how to pronounce his name. He said, if anything, the polls are underperforming even Trump. He's doing better than the polls they suggest. And so I think there's, I mean, it's a landslide. It's not like a 1984 landslide, but
right.
I think
when we talk about landslide, we're
victory.
talking about relative to recent elections where it comes down to 1 or 2 states or some Chads in Florida or
one
Ohio.
County. Right.
Exactly.
Here's my crazy call though, Brian. You ready for this?
Oh,
I think Trump wins the popular vote.
He said it right here on the Loopcast. Mark it.
I don't think that's going to happen. I'll put a little side pot in on that. But to answer Erika's question, I do think Trump wins fairly handily. Again, not some 1984 type, landslide. But and I agree with Josh. I think the Senate is likely to flip Republican because the map is so good. Republicans are essentially not defending any seat. We're only have chances to pick up. The top 5, 7 Senate races right now are all Democrat playing defense. Montana, West Virginia, Ohio,
Could
Michigan,
even win Wisconsin, possibly. I mean, there's
Wisconsin,
opportunities.
Nevada. I think Nevada will
Right.
probably be right after West Virginia. The House, though, I'm less convinced is in the bag. And I think, first of all, you only have about 17 to 22 seats there, even in play, by the way. 435 seats. Most of these districts have been drawn in such a way that they're hard red or hard blue. There's only about 20 seats that are really going to be factor here. And if you look at those races and you look at those candidates, and I've looked at some of the analysis, I mean, some of these are going to be really tough races. And I don't know if Trump has been able to prove that he can pull people up down ballot. There's a lot of Trump support, but a lot of times, even some of these voters we're just talking about that are shifting and away from the Democrats, it doesn't mean they're going to pull the lever necessarily for some House candidate Republican. That
he doesn't have coattails like
no
traditional presidential candidates. I agree with you on that, but man, if the Republican House could just pick up like a dozen seats, it would make it so much easier, because right now it's like 3 or 4, members can just hold the whole agenda hostage.
Right.
And on either side, right, left or right. So you really need a little bit more breathing room here. Give a little bit bigger of a margin, so you can get a tax bill passed that can end DEI and do all these other things. Put the squeeze on the left.
Yeah. So we will wait and see what happens. We'll definitely put that popular vote pot up at CV. See who goes for Josh or for Brian's take there. I just did want to pause for a second. Brian, you mentioned The Insider a couple of times. I want to do a plug. The Insider is our weekly newsletter. It's inside information, as the name suggests, from Brian, who sits down, gives us the scoop on what's going on the Hill, but also just culturally and Brian's own thoughts. And that goes to our champions. And the champions at Catholic Vote really power everything that we do here. So anyone in the chat who's watching who is a champion, thank you so much. They donate monthly, $10 or more a month. And you can check that out on the website. I'll put the link in the show notes. Check out the champions. Champions also get, or received this year, a free copy of the Catholic Vote book, For God, Country, and Sanity. Brian has the intro in there. It's a great read. Yes, thank you, Rez. Check it out. There it is. Beautiful cover. We love it.
We're looking for Catholics who are willing to make that monthly commitment to help us change America. So become a champion today.
And it helps keep Loopcast free. So definitely, if you love Loopcast, become a champion. That's my plug.
Well, let's be like full transparency here. Inside the Insider, Josh definitely helps me write some of that, or give me some, hey, did you see this? And then that book that was just referenced, Erika had a very big role in helping put that together. So yes, thank you for all the plugs, but your champion membership, your contribution goes to not just helping me do those things, but helping Erika, Josh, and all the rest of our team that makes all the things we're doing at Catholic Vote possible.
Thanks, Brian. It's a team effort. Everything that happens, team effort. All right. Speaking of team effort, the USCCB, United States Conference of Catholic Bishops, for those of you not familiar, they joined with a group of other Catholics in a lawsuit against the Biden department's EEOC, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, which is the federal agency that Congress gives authority to issue regulations about employment law. They have a lawsuit against this agency because the agency took an act passed by Congress, the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act, and surprise,
which the bishop supported, despite our warnings.
Yes, I wasn't going to say it. Someone asked me before the show, they're like, are you going to bring up the fact that I'm like, I'll just wait and see if the guys want to bring that up. But yes,
dude,
we warned.
Yeah. They say Irish have grudges, dude. They're not like me.
Not like the Vikings in Petoskey. Oh, man.
I'm telling you, man.
So the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act, we warned, would be a Trojan horse to force employers to accommodate and even pay for leave for employees to go and procure abortions. And in fact, that is exactly what happened. The PWFA was passed, and here comes the EEOC under the Biden administration and says, yes, employers now have to offer paid leave for their workers to go and procure abortions. This is classic federal mandate action. We did have a win. So the USCCB joins with other Catholic orgs. They sue, and a court blocked the ruling, the EEOC's rule, so that while the lawsuit is ongoing, at least Catholic organizations will not have to cover abortion leave
In those states, right?
in those states. So this was in Louisiana, the USCCB in Louisiana.
Well, I mean,
but-
it's the 5th district or whatever. So I think, right?
Yeah, exactly. So it's very limited. But what I wanted to bring up with you all was this sort of general, what is going on here in terms of the administrative state, the modern administrative state under the EEOC, forcing these kinds of rules and interpreting laws passed by Congress in such a way that it actually punishes religious organizations and people of faith. And do we see this in other agencies? And what can be done about it, gentlemen?
This actually has so much to do with Chevron.
Hey!
And not the gas company. Yes.
Yes. No. Well, I mean, technically, that's what the case is named after. But I mean, the whole point here is we warned the bishops, like, look, when they were doing Obamacare, this is going to be misused, and they're going to, force contraception and all this abortifacients and all this other kind of stuff. And we were proven right on that. And they said that's what they're going to do with this Pregnant Workers Fairness Act. They're going to force employers to do paid leave for abortion. And they're, I don't know. And they still support it. I'm like, dude, come on, fool me once, but
let's be fair. Remember what happened in the debate. Even Senator Casey, pro-abortion Catholic from Pennsylvania, goes to the Senate floor and says, there is no way this act will ever be used to force employers to pay for people to go get abortions. And the USCCB agreed with Senator Casey and said, we are not worried that the EEOC, once given the authority to interpret this law, will misuse that authority and force employers to do this. So the bishops calculated that it was worth the risk because they liked the underlying policy. The underlying policy, which is if a woman is employed and needs to go take leave to go get medical care, the employer should be required to tolerate that.
Or if she needs like a stool to sit down because she's pregnant.
Yes, or something, or a room to nurse her baby in, etc. Those are all wonderful things that are pro-family, pro-women, pro-mothers. But of course, we said, wait a minute, unless there are explicit prohibitions against using this law to promote leave for abortions, then all of these employers, including religious employers, but employers who do not want to pay their employees to go get an abortion, are going to be co-opted, and their religious liberty will be violated. Well, that provision was not allowed into the bill. And so, lo and behold, exactly what we predicted, and Erika has been very on top of this from the beginning, exactly what we predicted happened. EEOC gets the laws passed, they gain the power, they interpret it this way. Part of me is like, okay, it's wonderful. The court has given the USCCB temporary clearance so that they're not essentially funding employee leave for abortion. I don't know why a USCCB employee would need to go get an abortion. Just let's leave it at that. But it's almost like we're forced to celebrate the crumbs again. Like, oh, we have a temporary thing in a small district just for a religious employer. What about the everyday employer, the conscientious Christian or Catholic employer who's, a mechanic,
owns a hardware store,
and is now forced to do this, and their employee, unbeknownst to them, says, I'm going to get an abortion and you need to pay me while I go take care of this. It's outrageous. This should have never happened to begin with. We should have said, if you want this law passed, there needs to be explicit protections. We're not just going to settle for lip service from people like Senator Casey, who essentially was a full lie in retrospect, probably
and
knew
he
was
it.
lying. Yeah. Yes. And the moral of the story here is people need to pay attention to CatholicVote more.
and to go back to where I was starting at with before when I said Chevron. So like there's a lot of Supreme Court cases, and some of them, what is this even about? There's a court case like in 1984, I believe it was, where I think it was the EPA just started issuing these regulations that were very onerous, and Chevron and other companies protested, said that's not what the statutory law says. And the Supreme Court at the time gave great deference to the federal agencies to basically craft regulations because Congress wasn't specific enough. And they had to figure out what Congress meant. And the concern for a lot of people who are worried about, government power and the way government agencies can kind of run amok, that's kind of how we started the Revolutionary War in 1776. They said this is no way to have run a government. And so there's a case going right before the Supreme Court, might get decided any day now, where it says we really need to revisit this and we need to have a little bit more strict statute requirements for these agencies so that you can't have what the EEOC is doing here and just say, well, we'll just go ahead and, make it so that if someone wants to get an abortion, that they would qualify under this as well. When the law did not say that at all. And so this is one of those things where I know it seems like it's a little bit in the weeds, but this is an important Supreme Court case that we're watching and a lot of other people are watching because we want our federal agencies to actually enforce the law, not to write their own laws and go completely off book.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, Josh is so right on this. If you go back, and unfortunately, Josh and I are old enough to have been in even some of the hearing rooms, some of these Supreme Court confirmation battles, not just the recent ones with Gorsuch and Kavanaugh and Barrett, but even you go back to John Roberts and Alito, always, of course, the big issue in the room, abortion, Roe v. Wade, super duper precedent, all those back and forth fights. The other big issue, and if you go back and watch these, the thing that the Democrats focused most on was whether these judicial nominees were going to uphold this Chevron doctrine, which is essentially this idea, as Josh was just explaining, Congress passes this generic law and gives the full power to interpret the specifics and full discretion to these unelected agencies across the entire executive branch. This is the administrative state, as we call them, or some people just refer to it now as the deep state, meaning who are these faceless people, these bureaucrats that now decide the specifics of how to implement these generic laws that Congress passes. And Josh is right. This court case that's coming could very well begin, not entirely change, but begin to curb the discretionary power that this administrative state has. And I think that most people don't recognize how powerful that will be to begin to grab control back, Congress to grab control back, and to make sure that if Congress is going to pass a law, they need to be more specific about what their intentions are instead of just giving these bureaucrats the full power to implement.
Yeah,
I mean, it's some things, it's like the nuisances of life. So like, why don't things work as well as they should have? Like you have toilets that are low flush toilets. That was not a law that Congress passed.
Or your light bulbs.
Well, and then it's like gas, like you're gonna fill up your lawnmower with gasoline. It's like, well, why isn't there an air hole on here that could actually pour the gas out more easily? And it's this weird concoction. That wasn't Congress. It was some nameless bureaucrat who did that to you. Same thing with dishwashers. Why don't these things wash as good as anymore? It wasn't Congress, some faceless bureaucrat. That's what this Chevron thing's about. It's like having these unelected bureaucrats completely control your lives in every little way. Now, those are just nuisances. But we're talking about obviously much more important things like this Pregnancy Workers Fairness Act running amok now, or the HHS mandate. And the whole point is there was never a law passed. And while these laws were being debated, we were out there warning people like, this is what it's going to be. Oh, no, it'll never be that. And as soon as the bureaucrats take over, it's exactly what we warned about. And now we have to sue. We have to spend money suing in federal court just to get back what we had before, which we promised would never happen.
Right.
It's garbage.
Josh, you sound a little frustrated. Do you want to share with us your Twilight Zone? I think we might move into the Twilight Zone here because you might have a solution for your frustration. If I'm reading this correctly.
Wow. I do get a little worked up.
Yeah,
I'm a big guy.
Justly so.
I miss the old toilets that work better. So, okay. Well, you may have seen, we talked about this on the LOOPcast a few weeks ago. There was the women that went into the forest. They paid a lot of money and they did these
that was my Twilight Zone.
That was very good.
Women.
Well, hey, gotta have, equity, gotta have
equal
equality.
Opportunity.
So, yeah, now we have it for men too. This is so wonderful. So these men paid over $3,000 to attend a 4-day retreat in Montana where they could unleash their primal power and take responsibility for their lives and rekindle the connection with their true self. I don't know, guys. Maybe instead of paying $3,000 and screaming at the forest, you could just, I don't know, get baptized and go to church. Crazy idea.
Highly therapeutic. Oh yeah.
Here it is.
The scream session. Oh. Whoa, brother.
It even looks like a baptism, right?
It's religious in nature. Oh, they're screaming. Oh my goodness.
So when you get rid of religion, we're going to be completely rational men.
Oh.
You know? Oh, wait, no.
It's like mosh pitting, but
it's like our spirit and our soul still has a religious character because, of course, we're created in the image of God. So, you can try to pretend you cast out religion and you become super rational, but no, actually, you just become superstitious and silly.
Yeah, just kind of weird. Hey, did you see that Cori Bush interview on PBS where PBS seems to have found religion in the report? She's saying how she did like a faith
by touching
healing.
someone with
Yeah,
her
she
hand.
touched this woman's
Yeah.
tumors and they just disappeared and she walked away. I was like, that is like next level crazy religion.
Now, if she were a Republican, boy,
Oh, can you imagine if Donald Trump was like,
Right.
yeah, I faith healed somebody. Oh my gosh. Crazy times. Well, try screaming in the forest next time you are frustrated, gentlemen. All right. Or go to confession. It'll help in many more ways. All right, I'm going to do mine.
I do sometimes. I have a forest in my backyard. Sometimes I
Yeah.
do scream. I ain't gonna lie to you, but I don't pay $4,000 for it.
Smarter. Okay. This comes up pretty much every May or June. We get some progressive media outlet calling for more regulations of, you guessed it, the homeschoolers. And I have particular animus against this kind of thing. Scientific American calls for federal homeschooling regulations. And they have this top story talking about how in 2019, before the pandemic, about 3% of US children were homeschooled, 1.5 million. Estimates now are actually like 11 million children possibly on the upward swing. This is also interesting. The demographic that most increased their homeschooling population, any guesses? Working class Black Americans since 2020. Yeah, really interesting.
How many homeschoolers are there now? What did you say it was?
Some estimates upward of 11. I think that's really high.
Are you telling me that at this rate we might even have more homeschoolers than illegal aliens? That's amazing.
Whoa. The battle continues. Yeah. So, of course, what do the leftists want to do? Well, homeschool. Oh, so Scientific American starts off with homeschooled kids are doing great academically. They're winning the National Spelling Bee. They have famed mathematicians who were homeschooled, and they're talking about how great it has been for this cohort of children. And then they say homeschooling should be subject to some basic federal mandates. And here are their suggestions. Homeschooling parents should be required to undergo a background check. Instructors should be required to submit documents of their curriculum every year to their state and local governments. And the editors say, education is a basic human right. We need to make sure kids have chances to investigate what makes them curious and study history, science, and reading, which ironically are three of the subjects public school children are doing worst in. So other than mathematics, that's the rock bottom. But the comments on this on the Twitter were just precious to me. So we had Jordan Carpenter requiring a mom to get a background check to teach her own kids in her own home is next level evil. I like that one. And then we had Frank McCormick said, oh, no one checks to see that the children in homeschools are receiving an education. Well, that perfectly describes my experience in public education. And it just goes on and on, the irony. But this is a real thing. And there is a drive coming out of, in particular, Harvard and Yale, the education schools at those institutions, that homeschoolers need to be regulated more. And it's, people are taking their kids out of the public schools in order to improve their education, but also the over 60% of homeschoolers report the reason they take them out is because they want to avoid the woke ideology that they saw being foisted on their kids when the learning came home during the pandemic. And the lefts go, oh wait, no. We need to regulate this more. We need to know what your curriculum says. We need to know, in spite of the fact that all the receipts are in and all the studies indicate that these kids are learning to read, write, and do maths at a much higher percentage than their public school peers. So again, it's something to be aware of. This is a real push from the left in many states. And if you're in one of those states that currently has low homeschool regulation, you need to look into it. Make sure you join the HSLDA, Homeschool Legal Defense Association, and stay aware of these efforts. Because if we just fall asleep and say, oh, we're free to homeschool in the United States, it's great, they're going to come for you. And that's my Twilight Zone. Brian, take us home.
Oh, boy.
I will on the homeschooling thing. It was that when Jimmy Carter tried to go after homeschoolers, that actually woke up the Christian right.
Yeah,
That's like the people don't realize that they probably would have stayed home and left and just done their own thing, but the left
And that's when there was a tiny percentage of homeschoolers too. I mean,
very
a
tiny
fraction, right?
Yeah, like under 1%. Yeah.
All right.
Do
So
not
my
take them on.
Twilight
Go for
Zone,
it.
I was struggling between two options. So my honorable mention, which I'll mention, then I'll go back. My honorable mention was reading about Juneteenth this morning and reading NPR, a number of places that were claiming that if you are white and you celebrate Juneteenth, you are actually racist, because white people aren't allowed to celebrate Juneteenth. Because why? Because we are the beneficiaries of structural racism, and that we need to practice essentially forms of mortification and reparations, that for us to celebrate something is
religious.
Okay.
That might just be what gets reluctant conservatives to start celebrating Juneteenth.
Yeah, right. So that was my honorable mention. My real Twilight Zone, maybe you guys have used it, is the most obvious Twilight Zone there is, and everyone knows it. We are living in the Twilight Zone of a presidential candidate. I mean, literally, Joe Biden, almost daily in the Loop channel that we have for work, or in the political channel, we all change stories. There is a clip. We've seen him almost, if you're on social media, you see him almost on a daily basis. The freezing, the looking around into the distance. You know, we saw just the other day, the Democratic Party was mad at Obama because on stage with George Clooney, Obama had to grab Biden's arm to guide him off stage because he didn't even realize where he was. And it looked like Obama was taking advantage of the doddering old man. Well, lo and behold, once again, another clip this morning. I mean, what is the Twilight Zone? It's the kind of living between reality and fantasy. Biden's presidency is the Twilight Zone. His re-election campaign is literally living in the Twilight Zone. Now, go ahead and roll this clip. I mean, it's just unbelievable.
Members of Congress and Homeland Security Secretary, I'm not sure you're going to understand. Thanks to all the members of Congress and Homeland Security Secretary. I'm not sure you're going to understand.
I mean,
he couldn't get out Alejandro Mayorkas. Maybe you should nominate an incompetent fool with a weird sounding last name, I guess.
Well, I mean, this just leads to, 8 days from now, there's the first presidential debate. I know you guys are going to be talking about it. It's going to be very interesting to see whether the clear dementia, the, senile president who's clearly in decline. I mean, these types of things, isn't this a one-off thing? How that's going to manifest itself in the debate. But I'm sorry, when I think of the Twilight Zone, I can't help but think the candidacy of Joe Biden.
Yeah, I mean, the debate is going to be really interesting. They've definitely stacked the rules as much as possible to help Biden. But looking at clips like this, I don't think anything will.
But you see, the White House press secretary was saying that was a deep fake.
Not a deep fake, a cheap fake. A cheap fake. Yeah.
Right. Deceptive edits and all that stuff.
What they do with their Biden ads. The cheap fake. It's a video.
It was a media outlet that put out the original video, and it's unedited. Yeah. It's like, but again,
because we're all living in the Twilight Zone, Josh. This is it. We're all living in the Twilight Zone.
I mean, there's so many examples. I mean, yes, we had the bearded lady show up and greet the vice president at the White House. I mean, it's like the weirdest thing. I mean, they won't meet the parents of the people who died in Afghanistan, but bearded lady gets to go right to the White House. I mean,
that's a man lady. He's a male. That is a male. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, that's well, whatever.
Yeah, it is truly the Twilight Zone all the time. Maybe we need to rename the segment. We need like all the rest of the Loopcast is Twilight Zone, and then we have like a normalcy segment or something.
This
like
is the
that.
way reality
This
should
is the
be.
reality should be. Yeah, let's remember palate refresher. Okay, palate cleanser. Can't talk. All right, guys, thank you so much for a great Loopcast. If you want to support us, please make sure you're subscribed on YouTube and your favorite podcast channel. We're everywhere. Leave us a 5-star review or leave us a 1-star review and explain why, because we love to hear from you regardless. And as always, we'll end in prayer. Saint Fidelis, St. Thomas More, Our Lady of Guadalupe, pray for us, and we'll see you next time.